I still remember the sound of that door clicking shut. It wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate click. But to me, it sounded like a gunshot, because in that one quiet moment, I realized my own daughter-in-law had locked me out of my own home. I stood there, holding a small basket of folded laundry, barefoot on the cold porch tiles. The evening wind carried the smell of curry from the neighbor's kitchen, and somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and fell silent. Inside, I could hear faint laughter, my son's voice, low and tired, and hers sharp, controlled, almost triumphant. I didn't knock, not yet, because deep down, I already knew this wasn't an accident. My name is Renata. I'm 64 years old, a retired school teacher, and until last year, I thought I had a good life. Not perfect, but good enough to be thankful for. My husband, Walter, passed away 5 years ago. We were married 42 years, and even in silence, we understood each other. When he died, the house felt like a shell, every room echoing with the absence of his voice. 4 months, I couldn't even open his wardrobe. His jacket still hung there, smelling faintly of his aftershave. My son, Max, was all I had left. He's 38, smart, kind, though a bit too trusting. When he brought home Lena, I was happy for him. She was beautiful in that modern, polished way, always in soft beige sweaters, her nails perfectly done, her words carefully chosen. At first, she called me Mom. She'd bring over little gifts, a lavender candle, a silk scarf, once even a recipe book for easy senior meals. I thought it was sweet, even if it sounded a little. When they got married, they couldn't afford their own place. I offered the guest wing, 2 rooms, a separate kitchen, a small patio. Just until you both get settled, I told them. It felt right. Families should stay together, shouldn't they? For the first few months, things were peaceful. I cooked dinner, Lena helped with dishes. We had quiet evenings, watching TV while Max worked late. But slowly, the balance began to shift. It started with small things, the way she'd sigh when I entered a room, or how she'd forget to tell me about plans. Once, she moved my garden chair to the far corner of the yard because, as she put it, the clutter by the door looks messy. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd been a teacher long enough to know that patience solves more than anger ever could. But patience, I was learning, is only wisdom until someone mistakes it for weakness. One Sunday morning, I woke early. Habit, I suppose. I went to make tea, but the teapot was gone. I searched everywhere before finding it in their kitchen. When I asked Lena about it later, she smiled and said, "Oh, I just thought it would be easier if I kept it here. You can ask whenever you need it." Ask. That word stayed with me. It wasn't about the teapot. It was about permission. Soon, there were other changes. My grocery deliveries were redirected. Lena said she wanted to streamline expenses. When I tried to log into my online bank account, the password had been changed. Max told me not to worry. Lena is just organizing things, Mom. You know how good she is with numbers. And I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. But I started to notice her watching me. Not directly, more like the way one watches an unwanted guest. When I come into the kitchen, she closed the laptop. When I talked to Max, she'd suddenly find a reason to interrupt. One evening, while setting the table, I overheard them whispering in the next room. I caught just a few words. She'll understand it's better this way. Better what way? That night, I barely slept. A week later, the house felt heavier. The laughter I used to hear from their room was gone, replaced by muffled arguments. I tried to ignore it until I found the letter, folded neatly on my bedside table. It was from the utility company. The bill was overdue, 3 months unpaid, but I transferred money for those bills every month. I checked my bank statements. The funds were gone, withdrawn in cash. The next morning, when I asked Max, he looked uncomfortable. Mom, don't worry. Lena handled it. Maybe it was a mix-up, but his eyes darted away and my stomach twisted. I started paying attention. Receipts disappeared. Mail was redirected. And whenever I asked a question, Lena's tone grew sharper, colder. "Renata," she said once, "you worry too much. You're retired now. Let us handle things. Let us." As if I were the guest. The day she locked me out, it wasn't raining or storming. It was just ordinary. I had been hanging laundry outside. White shirts, tablecloths, my favorite blue dress. I came back to find the door shut. Through the window, I saw her, standing by the kitchen sink, her hands on the counter. She looked straight at me, not startled, not guilty, just calm. Then she turned away. I knocked. No response. I called her name. Nothing. My heart pounded. For a moment, I thought maybe she hadn't heard me. But then I noticed my keys weren't on the hook by the door. She'd taken them. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the laundry to dry stiff in the wind. Long enough for the sun to dip low. When Max finally came home, he looked confused to see me outside. "Mom, what are you doing out here?" Before I could answer, Lena appeared behind him. Her voice was soft, but her eyes dared me to speak. "Oh, Renata must have gone for a walk and locked herself out. I told you we should get her one of those senior tracking keychains." I smiled weakly. "That won't be necessary," I said, because what she didn't know was that I had a spare key. The one Walter gave me years ago, hidden behind a loose brick in the garden wall. That night, after they went to bed, I used it. I stepped quietly into my own home, my heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not anger, resolve. Something was very, very wrong, and I was going to find out what. That night, the house was silent, too silent. Even the clock in the hallway seemed to tick slower, as if it too was holding its breath. I moved carefully, my slippers brushing softly against the floor. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, her choice, not mine. I paused near the kitchen door, listening. Lena's voice came first, sharp, Claire, hush. I told you we can't keep her here forever, Max. It's not healthy for either of us. Then his tired, uncertain. She's my mother. She's not a stray dog we can just throw out. Oh, please, she snapped, her tone shifting into that sugar-coated softness she used with him. You know she doesn't even realize how much we've done for her. We pay the bills, the groceries, everything. She's draining us, Max, emotionally and financially. I felt a chill crawl up my arms. I had been giving them money, not the other way around. My pension, my savings. It was supposed to help with a mortgage and house upkeep. But as I stood there, half hidden in the hallway, I began to see the truth take shape like a shadow on the wall. This wasn't about care. It was control. The next morning, I acted normal. I made coffee, watered my plants, even offered Lena some tea. She declined, of course, saying she'd already had her oat milk latte. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I spent the afternoon looking for the old lockbox Walter and I used to keep in our bedroom closet. It was small, gray, and dented from years of use. Inside were our property papers, my bank details, and a few family photos. But when I found it, the key was missing. The lid, however, wasn't locked. And when I opened it, my hands began to shake. The papers were gone, replaced by blank sheets and a single envelope addressed to me. Inside, a printed letter from the bank, notification of account closure. They had moved my savings. For a moment, my knees went weak. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sunlight sliding through the curtains. Then something inside me hardened. I'd spent my whole life teaching children how to stand up for themselves, how to speak truth when it mattered. Maybe it was time I listened to my own lessons. That evening, I called an old friend, Claire, a retired nurse who lived 2 streets over. She was the kind of woman who always knew the right question to ask. When she picked up, I didn't cry. Not yet. I just said, Claire, I think someone's stealing from me. Within an hour, she was at my doorstep, holding a thermos of tea and her reading glasses. We went through my papers together, and by midnight, she confirmed what I already feared. The bank transfers were all under my name, authorized, digitally signed. Did you give anyone access to your account? She asked softly. Only Max, I whispered. Claire sighed, her expression kind but firm. Then maybe he gave it to her. You need to talk to someone, Renata. A lawyer, maybe. The thought of taking legal action against my own family felt unbearable. But as I lay awake that night, listening to the faint hum of their TV through the wall, I realized I didn't have much choice. The next morning, I left the house early. I told Lena I was going to the market, but instead, I took a taxi downtown. The lawyer's office smelled like dust and coffee, old wood furniture, stacks of folders, a little pot of wilting daisies by the window. The woman who greeted me introduced herself as Marta Vogel. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes softened by experience. I liked her immediately. When I told her everything, the missing money, the documents, the way Lena had been isolating me, she listened without interrupting. When I finished, Marta leaned back, tapping her pen thoughtfully. This kind of manipulation happens more often than you think, she said. It's called elder financial abuse. But you still have rights, Mrs. Hoffman. They can't just take what's yours. Her words gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time, strength. She helped me file a request to freeze my remaining accounts and secure the property title in my name again. Everything we do from here, she said, stays between us until you're ready. When I returned home that evening, Lena was waiting in the kitchen, her arms crossed. Where have you been all day? I went to visit Claire, I said. Her lips tightened. You should have told me. I was worried. I smiled faintly. Don't be. I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, not concern. Fear. Over the next few days, I played my part. I cooked, cleaned, even asked her for help with my phone bills, pretending to be confused about the app. Each time, she logged in easily, proving she had my passwords. So I changed them, all of them. I started keeping a small journal, every transaction, every remark she made, every moment she slipped and revealed her control. I wrote everything down in neat, careful handwriting, like I used to correct homework. By the end of that week, Marta had gathered enough proof. She called me on a Friday morning and said, Renata, it's time. That afternoon, when Max came home from work, I asked him to sit with me in the living room. Lena joined him, her hand resting possessively on his arm. I took a deep breath and slid a folder across the coffee table. Inside were printouts of the bank transfers, copies of the missing property papers, and my lawyer's letterhead. Max, I began, my voice calm but trembling. I know everything. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I said softly, that you allowed someone to take advantage of me, of your own mother. Lena's expression didn't change, but her grip on his arm tightened. Renata, this is ridiculous. Don't, I interrupted. Please. I've been patient, I've been kind, and I've given you both more than you deserve. But that ends today. Max looked between us, pale and lost. Mom, I didn't know she, but I could see it in his eyes. He had known something was wrong. He just didn't have the courage to face it. I said slowly, you have until Monday to leave this house. Both of you. My lawyer will handle the rest. Lena's composure cracked for the first time. Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. You think you can just throw us out? After everything we've done for you? I met her gaze evenly. You didn't do it for me. You did it for yourself. Then I turned and walked out of the room, my hands trembling, my heart pounding, but my head held high. That night, I locked my door for the first time in years. And this time, I kept the spare key with me. The weekend that followed was long, painfully long. Every creak of the floorboard, every muffled muffled whisper through the wall felt like a countdown. I could sense the tension growing, thick as fog. Lena avoided me completely, and when she did look my way, her eyes burned with quiet hatred. Max, on the other hand, looked broken, torn between guilt and denial. He moved around the house like a ghost, his footsteps hesitant, his voice barely audible. I didn't try to talk to him. Not yet. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words ever can. Sunday morning came, cold and gray. I woke before dawn, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window, the same window I'd stood outside of the day she locked me out. It felt like a lifetime ago. The garden looked peaceful, dew glistening on the grass, a few birds pecking near the fence. It was hard to believe that behind these calm walls, betrayal had been festering for months. Around noon, the sound of drawers slamming echoed through the hallway. They were packing. I listened as Lena barked orders at Max, her voice sharp, commanding, "Don't forget the documents, and the laptop, and for God's sake, hurry up." I didn't move. I didn't need to. By now, I had seen enough to know that the truth had finally cornered her. When they finally came downstairs, Max stopped in front of me. His eyes were red, his hands shaking slightly. "Mom, we're leaving." I nodded. "I know." Lena stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed, her expression tight and defensive. "You've made a huge mistake, Renata," she said coldly. "You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. I already regretted too much. This is the first thing I don't. She scoffed, grabbed the suitcase handle, and walked out. The door closed behind her with that same click, but this time, it didn't sound like a gunshot. It sounded like freedom. The first few days after they left were strangely quiet. The silence that once felt heavy now felt like peace. I spent my mornings cleaning, wiping away fingerprints from the kitchen handles, folding the sheets they left behind, scrubbing away every trace of tension from the air. It wasn't just about tidying, it was about reclaiming. When I finally sat down that evening, the house smelled of lemon again, but this time, it was my lemon from the tree Walter and I had planted years ago in the backyard. I brewed tea, lit a candle, and called Claire. "They're gone," I said softly. Her sigh of relief came through the line. "Good. And you?" "I'm tired," I admitted, "but lighter." She laughed gently. "That's what happens when you start breathing for yourself again." A week later, Marta called with news. "The investigation is moving forward," she told me. "Lena made several unauthorized transfers under your name. We'll be able to recover most of your funds." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Do you want to press charges against her, or let it go once the money is returned?" I thought about it for a long time. About revenge, about justice, about peace. Then I said, "No, I don't want her in prison. I just want her gone from my life." Marta understood. "That's strength, not weakness, Mrs. Hoffman." But I didn't feel strong. Not yet. I felt human. It took me months to settle into the rhythm of solitude again. At first, the empty spaces felt too big, the quiet too loud. But slowly, they became my companions. I started gardening again. I joined a book club at the local library. On weekends, Claire and I went to the farmer's market, bought fresh flowers, and shared gossip over pastries. And one morning, while watering my roses, I realized I was smiling, not because something extraordinary had happened, but because nothing had. And that, I realized, was peace. Then one afternoon, about 4 months later, Max showed up. I hadn't heard from him since the day he left. When I opened the door, he stood there, thinner, older, a shadow of the boy I once rocked to sleep. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. I didn't speak at first. I just looked at him, really looked. His eyes were tired, but not cruel. His voice trembled with something that sounded like regret. "Can I come in?" I nodded slowly. He stepped inside, glancing around the familiar space, as if trying to remember what home used to feel like. We sat in silence for a while. Then he spoke. "She left me." I said nothing. He stared at his hands. "After you. After everything happened. She changed. She said I was useless without your money. I tried to make it work, but..." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am." The anger I had once carried toward him was gone. What I felt now was something else. Sorrow, maybe, but mixed with understanding. We all make mistakes when love blinds us. I reached across the table and touched his hand. "You were raised better, Max. You just forgot for a while." His eyes filled with tears. "Do you think you could ever forgive me?" I took a deep breath. "Forgiveness isn't a gift, Max. It's a process. But yes, I can try." He nodded, his shoulders shaking as he cried quietly, the way he used to when he was little and scraped his knee. And in that moment, I realized that maybe we were both healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but healing. That night, after he left, I walked outside to the garden. The air was cool, the moon bright. I found myself standing by that same loose brick where my spare key still rested, the one that had given me back my strength. I didn't move it. I left it there, a small reminder of the day I chose myself. Because sometimes, life locks you out. But if you've hidden even one small piece of strength somewhere deep inside, you'll always find your way back home. The days that followed were quiet, almost eerily so. The house seemed to breathe with me, expanding and contracting like it had been waiting for me to reclaim it fully. I spent mornings in the garden, hands buried in soil, planting marigolds and lavender where Lena had once said they looked tacky. Now, they were mine again. Every stem, every petal, a small victory. Evenings were slower, gentler. I would sit by the window with a cup of tea, listening to the distant sounds of children playing down the street, or the soft hum of the neighbor's radio. I realized how long it had been since I allowed myself this peace, this ordinary, unremarkable joy. But peace, I discovered, didn't come come in grand gestures. It came in quiet moments where you could finally breathe without fear. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something in the tone of the voice on the line, precise, careful, almost hesitant, made me listen. "Mrs. Hoffman?" the woman asked. "This is from Marta Vogel's office. May I speak with you for a moment?" I told her yes, setting my teacup down with a trembling hand. "Mrs. Hoffman," she began, "we have some updates regarding the account recoveries. Lena tried to transfer more funds just last week, but we intercepted it in time. We also discovered evidence. She attempted to forge your signature on additional documents. Max's cooperation has been crucial. We can proceed with legal closure as soon as you're ready." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. My heart was racing, but it wasn't fear. It was relief, tempered with a strange exhaustion. Months of betrayal, uncertainty, and quiet rage were slowly being addressed. Finally, it seemed, the truth had teeth. I'm ready," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Let's finish this." Later that week, Marta arrived at the house to meet me in person. She had brought files, photographs, and copies of every document Lena had manipulated. Sitting together at the dining table, I traced the lines of evidence with my finger, imagining the moment Lena would finally be confronted. "I have to warn you," Marta said softly. "This might be emotional. You've been patient, but seeing all of this laid bare, it's powerful." I nodded. I didn't feel the need to speak. My eyes were fixed on the pages, reading the transactions, the signatures, the manipulations. Each one felt like a small brick removed from a wall I had been trapped behind for so long. When she finished explaining, she looked at me. "Renata, you have two choices. You can press charges, or you can proceed to civil restitution and protect your assets without further public confrontation. The decision is yours." I leaned back, letting my hands rest on the edge of the table. I thought about Lena, her arrogance, her control, the way she had smiled when she thought I was powerless. But I also thought about Max, my son, my boy, and how easy it is for someone to be swept along by another's influence. I wanted justice, yes, but I also wanted peace. And I realized that revenge would only prolong the shadow over this house, over my life. "I want restitution," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "Everything returned, everything secured. But I don't want her life ruined. I want her gone from mine and from Max's without further entanglement." Marta nodded. "Wise choice. You're reclaiming control without losing your integrity. That's rare." That evening, I began a small ritual. I went through the rooms Lena had occupied, not angrily, but with intention. I cleared out cupboards, wiped down counters, removed the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the corners. I even replaced the light bulbs she had chosen, soft, white, warm, with ones I preferred. Each act was small, but each one felt like reclaiming a piece of my home and, in a way, myself. When Max returned that night, he paused in the doorway, taking in the changes. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were wet. "Mom, it feels like you again," he said softly. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "It is Max. This is me. Finally." We didn't speak much that evening. Words weren't necessary. We simply sat together, the quiet now comforting rather than oppressive. And for the first time in months, I slept without the fear of being shut out, literally or figuratively. A few days later, Marta called again. "Renata, all transfers are being reversed. Your accounts are secure. Property titles are officially in your name. Lena and Max will have no claim hereafter. You're protected." I closed my eyes, letting the weight of those words sink in. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe fully. I could exhale years of frustration, sorrow, and fear. That night, I lit candles in the living room, their soft glow reflecting off the walls. I poured myself a glass of wine, something I hadn't done in months, and sat with Walter's old photographs. I spoke aloud to him, as I often did, telling him about the battle, the reclaiming, the quiet victories. "We did it, Walter," I whispered. "We survived them." Weeks passed, and the house felt alive again. The garden bloomed, the kitchen smelled of fresh herbs and simmering soups, the living room carried the laughter of neighbors visiting for tea. Max slowly found his own space in this new normal, apologizing in small ways, helping with groceries, taking on small repairs, showing an understanding that had been absent before. I realized something essential during this time. Strength isn't just about confrontation or legal victories. It's about standing firm in your own life, protecting yourself, and choosing your peace over bitterness. Lena had tried to control, manipulate, and isolate, but I had something stronger than fear. I had myself, and a clear mind to protect my home and my heart. One evening, I found myself standing by the loose brick again. I brushed my fingers over the spare key resting inside. I didn't move it. I didn't need to. It was a reminder, not a tool. A reminder that life may lock you out, but the power to return is always within you. And that night, under the same moon that had shone over my solitude months before, I felt it, true freedom. Not just from Lena or the betrayal, but from the fear that had held me captive for far too long. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and early blooms. I had been awake for hours, pacing the garden, reflecting on how fragile trust can be and how fiercely one must guard it. The house felt solid now, safe, yet I couldn't shake the memory of that cold, deliberate click when Lena had locked me out. That sound had haunted me long after the door had closed. I was sipping tea when I heard a knock at the front door. I froze for a moment, my heart skipping a beat. Visitors were rare at this hour, and Marta had said all the formal steps were moving wading through the legal channels. I set down my cup and walked slowly to the door. Through the peephole, I saw her, Lena, alone this time. Her face was pale, eyes wide, and there was a tension in her shoulders that I hadn't seen before. I hesitated before opening it. My hand lingered on the brass knob, remembering every small betrayal, every lie, every manipulation. And yet, I opened it. "Renata," she began, voice shaky. I didn't mean. I held up a hand. "Please, don't bother explaining. I already know everything." Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, there was nothing but the silence of guilt stretching between us. She looked like a child caught in a storm she hadn't anticipated, her confident armor shattered. She started again, but I interrupted, calmly but firmly. "You've caused enough harm. The money will be returned. Your influence here is gone, and you're no longer welcome in this house." Tears welled in her eyes. "Renata, I thought you'd never find out. I thought I needed him and you. I thought you wouldn't." "You thought wrongly," I said softly, stepping aside. "Please leave, Lena. Walk away from this house and from Max before anything worse happens. The law is already involved. It's better if you leave voluntarily." She swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling rapidly, and after a long, trembling pause, she nodded. She stepped back, turned, and walked down the garden path. The crunch of gravel beneath her heels felt final, like the closing of a chapter one hadn't known could be so liberating. Once the door was shut, I leaned against it, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding. The house felt lighter, not because Lena was gone, but because the fear, the tension, the constant vigilance had finally lifted. Max arrived an hour later, hesitating at the doorway. His face was lined with shame, yet there was relief in his eyes. "Mom, I wanted to make sure she left. I can't believe I let it go that far," he admitted, voice tight. I walked to him slowly, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Max, you were blind. You didn't see her manipulation for what it was. But we can fix this. We can rebuild." His shoulders slumped. "I feel like I failed you. I failed myself." "You didn't fail yourself, Max. You were learning. Painfully," I said, taking his hand. "The important thing now is that we move forward together." That afternoon, I went back to the garden. The sun was breaking through clouds, casting soft light on the marigolds I had planted. Each bloom seemed brighter, more resilient. I picked up the spare key from the loose brick, holding it gently. I traced the worn edges with my thumb and smiled. It was a symbol now, not just of a physical key, but of every choice I had made to protect myself, my dignity, and my home. Lena may have tried to lock me out of my life, but she could never lock me out of my own strength. I sat on the garden bench, the cool wind brushing my hair, and I thought about all the women who might watch my story on YouTube, the mothers, the widows, the empty nesters, who might feel powerless in their own homes. I wanted them to know, even when life shuts a door, there's always a way back if you are patient and determined enough to find it. The next few weeks passed in quiet reconstruction. I went through every room, every drawer, every corner, reclaiming what was mine, both physically and emotionally. I organized my finances, reinforced security measures, and even started a small journal, not to document wrongdoing, but to celebrate daily victories, small acts of independence, and moments of joy that I had forgotten to notice. Max started helping without being asked, learning responsibility in a way that felt genuine for the first time. We shared meals, laughter, and even arguments, but they were arguments rooted in care, not manipulation. One morning, as I brewed coffee, I found myself humming a tune Walter used to whistle in the kitchen. It was a simple act, but it reminded me of the life I had before betrayal, and of the resilience I had built afterward. And then came the final step. Marta informed me that Lena had agreed to return all funds, sign documents releasing any claim to the property, and officially remove herself from our lives. It was a quiet, almost anticlimactic victory. No courtroom drama, no public spectacle, just resolution. When I signed the last document, I felt a sense of closure unlike anything I had experienced before. Lena's shadow was gone. The house, the garden, the air. It was all mine again, fully and freely. I called Claire immediately. "It's done," I said, and we laughed, cried, and celebrated quietly over the phone. The years of fear, anxiety, and betrayal had ended not with violence, but with courage and patience. That evening, I sat in the living room, looking out the window at the garden bathed in golden sunset. Max joined me, sitting silently with his cup of tea. We didn't need to speak. The silence itself was enough. I realized then that the greatest power I had reclaimed wasn't the money, the property, or even the house. It was my sense of self. I had learned to trust my instincts, to stand firm, and to know my worth. No one could take that away. For the first time in a long while, I felt whole. Truly, wholly, unshakably whole. The days turned into weeks, and the house finally settled into a rhythm that felt like mine again. No tension lingered in the hallways. No whispered arguments echoed through the walls. Even Max had started to smile with ease, the kind of smile that comes from learning humility and responsibility the hard way. He still carried the weight of guilt from the past, but now it was tempered with understanding and the determination to do better. I spent my mornings in the garden, hands deep in soil, planting flowers and herbs that Walter and I had once loved. The scent of lavender mixed with marigolds became a daily reminder that life could be beautiful again, even after betrayal. I realized that healing isn't instantaneous. It's small, quiet, and persistent. Every act of tending, every seed I planted, was a symbol of rebuilding trust with myself and reclaiming the joy I had let others take from me. Afternoons were for reading or writing letters to old friends. I had started keeping a journal again, not one to track transactions or betrayals, but one to celebrate life, moments of happiness, and lessons learned. Each entry was a way of telling myself, you survived, you grew stronger, you are in control. I found comfort in this ritual, in the ability to reflect without fear or resentment clouding my thoughts. Evenings became my sanctuary. I would light candles, pour myself a cup of tea, and watch the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sometimes, Max would join me. Other times, I would sit alone, listening to the birds settling in for the night. Silence no longer felt heavy. It felt like a gift, the space to breathe, to reflect, and to exist without the shadows of manipulation. One day, as I watered the roses, I noticed a loose brick in the garden wall, the one that had held my spare key all those months ago. I touched it gently. The key was still there, its metal worn but strong. It had been a lifeline, a symbol of resilience and preparedness. I didn't remove it this time. It was a reminder, not a necessity, of the strength I had discovered in myself. I thought about all the women who might see my story, who might relate to my journey, mothers, grandmothers, widows, empty nesters, or anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of someone else's control. I wanted them to know that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers quietly but persistently from the depths of your being. Weeks later, Max and I sat on the porch one evening, the sky ablaze with the colors of dusk. He looked at me, eyes wide, hesitant, yet filled with a new understanding. Mom, he said quietly, I've learned so much from this about responsibility, about honesty, about what really matters. I hope one day I can be the kind of man you raised me to be. I reached over and took his hand. Max, you're already becoming him. You just needed to see the consequences to understand fully. We all stumble, sometimes. What matters is that we keep moving forward. He nodded, squeezing my hand gently. In that moment, I saw forgiveness in his eyes, not just for me, but for himself. And I realized that my journey of empowerment was not just mine alone. It had become a lesson for him too, a blueprint for resilience and integrity. The legal matters concluded quietly. Lena's restitution was processed, her access completely revoked. Max had learned to distance himself from her influence, and for the first time, the house felt genuinely ours, a sanctuary, not a battlefield. I could finally host friends, invite neighbors, and even have small gatherings without the lingering fear of manipulation or betrayal. I began volunteering at a local community center, helping older women navigate financial literacy and protect themselves from exploitation. Each story I shared, each lesson I taught, reinforced my own journey and gave me purpose beyond the walls of my home. I realized that empowerment multiplies when shared. When I helped others reclaim their confidence and independence, I felt my own strength deepen. As the months passed, life regained its rhythm. I laughed freely again, cooked meals that smelled of comfort and warmth, and cherished quiet moments of reflection. I kept the spare key in the garden, a symbol of preparedness and resilience, but I no longer needed it to feel secure. I had learned that real security comes from knowing your worth and standing firm, even when the world tries to push you out. One night, as I stood in the garden, the moon casting a silver glow across the flowers, I felt a wave of peace wash over me. The betrayal, the fear, the manipulation, all were behind me now. I had reclaimed my home, my finances, and most importantly, my sense of self. And I understood, finally, that life doesn't just hand you back what was taken. You reclaim it, one choice, one act of courage at a time. So now, dear listener, I ask you, have you ever felt shut out of your own life, controlled by those you love, or manipulated into doubt? And if you have, how did you find your way back? Sometimes, the smallest key, a moment of courage, a conversation, a choice to stand firm, can open the door to freedom. It's not always easy, and it's rarely quick, but the strength you need is already within you. If my story resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me how you've reclaimed your strength, or how you might take the first step. And remember, even when life locks you out, there is always a way back home if you trust yourself and your instincts. Thank you for listening. Stay strong, stay patient, and never forget the power you carry within you.